Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here, and I figured it's about time that I make a video where I talk about my thoughts and feelings about PoE2 and kind of like where the game is right now and where I think the game is going. For a little bit of background, I have like 10,000 plus hours in PoE1, getting kind of close to 11, and we have about 350-ish hours in PoE2 without like AFKing and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So like, been enjoying playing it, but I do think that there's kind of like a lot of issues and problems. This video is probably going to be more me talking about the things that I don't like than the things that I do like. But as a content creator in PoE, of course, there's been a lot of benefits for myself personally. It's been a very popular game. We've seen a lot of growth on the channel, thanks to all 5,883 new subscribers here in the last 28 days. That's a tremendous good reason for me to like only talk about positive things about the game. However, I do think that there are a lot of spots where we really do need to provide feedback if we don't like stuff. And early access is supposed to be about giving them feedback and stuff. And so maybe this video will get seen by somebody at GGG, or maybe you guys will have some sort of thoughts on this. You can have some comments down in the comments below. And yes, before you start scrolling down that I can't make any complaints about the game because it is an early access and they're working on stuff. Well, yes, of course, everybody knows it's in early access. And that's just the way that they decided to label this part of the game. But really, in a lot of ways, this is more of like a paid early access type of thing. It's like a paid beta where we're paying basically to be here. Yes, you might have gotten access for free because you've whaled out hundreds of dollars already. I mean, I have like almost $4,000 spent in PoE1, but it's still a pay to play game right now. And I do think that there are quite a bit of issues and there's a lot of stuff that I'm just like not overly satisfied with. And I'm just going to kind of go into it real quick here. So the very first thing I want to talk about is the campaign. And we'll say that the campaign was very cool, very like awesome, very different than PoE1's campaign for the first time. And this really kind of leads into what was a lot of my concerns before we actually got to play the game, which was that the fact that the campaign seemed like it was going to be very big. And it did take me a lot of time to finish the campaign my very first time through. I think it was like, I don't remember how many hours, it was like 20 plus hours to get through the campaign. And I had thought that once I gotten through Act 1 through 3, that cruel difficulty was going to be much faster because, I knew where to go. I knew all the stuff. My build was really strong. We were just blowing up bosses, freezing them. They weren't getting to fight back. But it actually took me longer to get through cruel than it did normal, which I thought was pretty wild. And I just really kind of feel like the zones and the maps and everything just feel very long and huge for no real good reason. And it just felt like I walk like 5 feet. I get jumped by a whole bunch of range mobs or a whole bunch of jumping monsters. I kill them, walk another 5 feet, and I get jumped again. It reminds me a little bit of playing Dragon's Dogma 2, where you like fight off a band of goblins and like your companion's like, oh, good fight. And then you walk 5 feet and get jumped by bandits. And then you kill those guys and you walk another 5 feet and get jumped by a giant. And then you walk another 5 feet, more goblins. And it just kind of felt like that. Like I was just constantly having to deal with these like annoying like white monsters that were just kind of like able to blast me super duper hard, and like having to like dodge out of the way of their ranged attacks and either just ignore them or just keep moving forward and killing them. I didn't really like overly enjoy it too much. Some of the boss fights I do think were pretty cool. However, like I said, we played Ice Strike, so we pretty much just freezing all of the bosses. I didn't really get to experience a lot of the mechanics, but I did just play through the campaign again on a new character, at least the first 3 acts. And there was definitely a lot of bosses where it felt like the mechanic to get around most of their attacks was to stay as close to them as possible and constantly roll behind them whenever they turn to face you and do an attack. And like I did the big monkey fight thing. He was like slamming down. I'm trying to stay at range, throwing sparks and stuff. And I realized that that wasn't working. And so I just got close to him, dodged behind him every single time he turned around, and that worked easily. And I had no problems killing the boss. I just didn't really think that that was super duper great boss design. The first time it definitely felt really cool, very amazing, very like popping, but I don't think that that's something I want to experience like a couple of times a season. Like typically like an ARPG, it's not like a one and done type of thing. You want to go and like play the game like every single season reset. And I cannot imagine wanting to play a game where we have a season reset like every 3-4 months, and then the campaign takes 24 hours to do. It's just I don't think that even me as a content creator is like able going to be willing and wanting to do that. That's just way too much for me. I want to get into the end game. I prefer like stories and campaigns that either like a really small snippet that kind of gets you into the end game. You're playing it right away. Because like right now I'm playing through a character and I'm on like act 1 cruel, and I still don't have the access to my skill gems and stuff that I actually want to play. I can't actually play my real build, and it's been like 7+ hours of this character, and it's just kind of like I'm already kind of over leveling it, which is kind of annoying. And on top of that, difficulty of respec is something I really didn't experience on my first playthrough, but on my second character, I definitely made a mistake right away. In my very first points that I spent, I wanted to respec, and then I realized that there was no way for me to respec until I had unlocked the hooded one. And so I think that just the amount of ability for us to mess around and customize our characters very early on, even just like at all, like while you're like going through the campaign, like gold is kind of an issue. I think it's like a little bit too strict, and I would really love to see them open that up, because there's just a lot of potential. Like I haven't really messed around with the different weapon trees and stuff because the UI for that feels also really funky, and also it's just like it just feels a little bit clunky to me, and it's not very enjoyable. That's like a whole nother thing though. So yeah, and then once we got through the campaign, I was kind of like a big sigh of relief. I was very excited to be finally in maps, finally playing the content. For me, when I'm going through the campaign, it always feels like I'm trying to go from point A to point B as fast as possible so I can finish up the campaign, so I can get into maps. But then finally, when you're in maps, it does kind of feel like you kind of want to kill more stuff and actually experience the full breadth of the area, because you're actually like earning currency, because this is a social game where I really like having the currency from trading. I like finding items that are valuable to other people and then be able to, give them that while I get something back in return that helps me make my character more powerful. And that's just one of the things I really like about ARPGs. However, the only thing that's really super profitable and even really fun right now in maps is Breach. Breach just has these super huge, satisfying explosions, at least with my build, and it's just a lot of money, a lot of currency. This is pretty much what like most people I think are doing in terms of making currency. They are just blasting through breaches, and this really doesn't look like the PoE1 that I was expecting. It kind of feels like we're playing like two different games. Like the monsters are very, very fast, but we're very slow in this PoE1. But then like blowing up breaches feels very, in PoE2, it feels very much like in PoE2 we're very slow. Monsters are very fast. But then in the breach here, it feels like I'm back in PoE1 in a lot of ways. There's a lot of density, there's a lot of monsters. We can kill them very quickly. We can cascade killing them with effects with like Herald of Ice, for example. And that just like really gives you a lot of clear speed and a lot of just like that pops and explosions that I have come to know and love from PoE1. And it just feels a little bit disjointed. And my concern here is that they are going to absolutely demolish the breach situation once they're coming back from vacation, and they're going to absolutely demolish like the Herald explosions and stuff, and just really dial back the game even more in terms of speed. But we'll have to see kind of where that's going to be. And so breach is pretty much the only thing that I think that's super duper profitable. Pretty much all of the other mechanics that they have in here is like a ghost in the shell of what we have in PoE1. And so like ritual, for example, doesn't really feel all that great most of the time. Yes, like you can potentially get some really, really good things like Audience with the King or something, but like actually getting the tiles or whatever to add to the towers, which is a whole separate topic, they're kind of difficult to get. And then most of the time when I re-roll a whole bunch, there's like no omens, there's nothing. I really just wish omens and stuff were quite a bit more common, and that the keys to actually access these bosses were a lot more easy to get. I also really don't like the one life, one portal mapping system. I don't like the layouts and stuff. For the most part, it feels like I'm just trying to figure out how to find the most savannas and other maps that are good layouts while trying to avoid like all of the auguries that seem to be freaking everywhere on the map. There's no real control for me for what we're doing with the atlas. And like as I spread away from my atlas, it kind of is like just the same stuff all the time. It's just like always the same, like randomly generated blah blah. And I prefer PoE1 mapping again as opposed to this. And so it does kind of feel like a lot of the like good foundations that PoE2 has is a lot of it's just like the ruins of PoE1. And this is like one of the things I kind of think is not really acceptable as this being an early access game is because it's not early access for these particular features. This is like something that like they have tried and tested in PoE1, and it just kind of feels like they either like ignored the lessons learned from that, or they're just trying to like try the thing that didn't work again to try like make it work. I remember one of my friends commented that the Sanctum league mechanic, which is like basically Trial of the Secima, one of the very first patches that they had to do for that was the exact same patch that we had to get for Trial of the Sekimas to like make it better for melee and other stuff. And so it just really kind of feels like we're retreading in some of the places where PoE1 had to like already get some like lessons learned, and those lessons learned didn't get carried over into PoE2. And yeah, I just find the mapping situation kind of boring, and the endgame boss pinnacle stuff especially is very punishing. It just kind of feels like typically the cost of a key, so like a breachstone, audience with king and stuff, all of that is always going to be priced around the person who can do it at the most financially like efficient model. And so to also pair that with the ability for you to get your like level 1, 2, 3, 4 passive points on the mechanic is really rough, especially for people that are like late comers to the mechanic or are slower. Because like if I'm able to go and buy 100 breachstones and just blast through and go kill the final boss and get like good loot or get like the gloves or whatever, like you're competing with me in order to purchase those. I'd love to see them like rework it where it's like you get your first points from just doing the mechanic in the maps, and then you get more points for doing like the boss is like easier to summon or something. So like imagine if like the first tier of the boss only required 1 audience with a king. You want to do tier 2, you need 2 audiences, then 3, then 4. And so the entry cost scales up with your potential returns from it. And so like let's say you need to do like audience of the king 3 or 4 in order to get the fancy belt. I think that would probably be a better system than what we have right now. But in generally, I think that the whole mapping system, waystone system, kind of just needs to be redone because it's it's just not as fun as PoE1. And I think that there's like, you know, I wouldn't be very happy if this was the end game for the next like several years of PoE2. Also, let's talk about character customization. So they did some interesting choices with the passive tree. They removed life. They basically made it so that skills are bound to specific weapons. I think in some ways this does add some interesting limitations to builds in terms of like, if I want to use Ice Strike, for example, I have to use a War Staff. Maybe they'll like expand that out a little bit. However, part of that does mean that like a lot of builds end up feeling pretty samey. Like a lot of people who like show me their Ice Strike build that they've like completely cooked up by themselves without doing really anything, without looking at what other people are doing, ends up looking very similar to basically all of the other Ice Strike builds, especially in terms of we're missing like a whole bunch of supports and stuff. We're missing auras and all that stuff, but like it does end up feeling a little bit samey in the same builds, even without people like looking at stuff, which I don't really like. And it's also without having the ability to invest in life on the tree, it does feel like it's a little bit more difficult to travel from like Monk, for example, all the way over to the like bottom left hand corner of like all the warrior armor stuff. And I don't really know if that you could like really do that. The only really builds that I see that are very much traveling are the attribute stackers, which are probably a little bit overtuned right now. But they also have the ability to basically go everywhere. And I think that a lot of builds are also be able to like focus in on energy shield, which is just way better in terms of all of the other like defensive layers of like energy shield, evasion, armor. Energy shield is just like head and shoulders above everything else, and especially because it gives you like just super amount of effective life. And there's just some really good auras and other stuff that really make that good. And also crafting feels horrible right now. Like this is probably one of my like least favorite crafting situations I've seen in a long time. At least in Path of Exile's history. And like I really don't like the idea that it's just a huge slot machine. And I want to do a video that talks specifically why war staffs and like melee weapons feel like it's really hard to buy a good weapon. But suffice to say that the like odds are not in our favor for making a good weapon really ever. And like your odds for making like good armor and other stuff tend to be like I think a little bit more forgiving, because you don't necessarily need particular like 6 stats on one particular thing where the weighting is against you, which is pretty wild. And yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts so far. I think that we have basically we're at like kind of a precipice with the game where we've had this like long period of time while they've been away for Christmas. And I'm not even going to get about into the idea that like I don't really like the fact that they like dropped the game and then went on holiday. I feel like it probably would have been better off if they had waited to release this to the end of January or something like that, just to like be able to have all hands on deck to be able to solve all the problems. Like we have dupes, we have Temporalis going down to like less than 20 divines right now. It's pretty crazy. And we have people getting their accounts hacked through session ID spoofing or something. And it's just like, it really makes me wish that they had not gone on break. But yeah, we're at this point right now where we don't know what type of future PoE2 has, whether they're going to choose to effectively go and like push the game more towards like what they said PoE2 was going to be like, a lot more of that slow, like meandering gameplay type of stuff, or if they are going to basically like lean back into like a PoE1 style of like zooming a little bit. And I kind of like feel like they're gonna end up nerfing like a lot of the stuff like Archmage, Spark, Energy Shield, Herald Explosions, like a whole bunch of stuff I think is just going to get chopped down here relatively soon. And that kind of like does make it kind of feel bad. It's like, oh, I want to make a new character, but I don't know if it's going to get nerfed to the ground. So maybe I should just wait, which kind of sucks. My other concern is that I feel like there's a lot of things where the meme kind of with PoE2 for the last like 6 years while we've been waiting for it has been that PoE2 will fix it. All of these problems and issues that PoE1 had, they said that PoE2 was going to solve. Like, for example, loot filter. It said that we weren't going to need a loot filter. If you talk to basically anybody who's playing on console, the game is practically unplayable at endgame right now. The entire like loot is all over the ground, and it's just absolutely crazy. Can't see anything. And even me with a very strict loot filter, I get a whole bunch of stuff that I'm, probably not super duper interested in. And so there's just like stuff like that. I feel like I have to spend a lot of time like managing and clicking all of my loot. Like there's a lot of stuff that I wish I could just like automatically scoop up, so I don't end up having to run a breach and then have to backtrack through the breach in order to pick up all of my loot every single map, because breach is really the only way to make money right now. I would love like a little like all of the breach splinters just getting vacuumed up into my pocket or something would be really nice. Just some certain currencies getting vacuumed up would be really nice as well. Just like not having to like deal with this like little tiny inventory that feels very antiquated in a lot of ways. Well, that said, pretty much my thoughts here are that. And I think the PoE2 has good roots. I think that there's some good stuff going on. There's some issues. And it's going to be very interesting to see where they go next. Let's just say that. We'll be playing more PoE2 for the next couple of days. I am very excited about the Torchlight Infinite season coming up. There's a lot of, I think, good things that I really would hope that PoE2 steals from this. I did a whole video talking about that. That should be coming out either soon or already, depending on what time you're watching this video. And there's like just a lot of like, I've like told devs like basically You need to steal this mechanic from Torchlight. You need to steal this. It's like really cool, really great quality of life. I'm just literally looking forward to hopping back into that game for a little bit. And no, this is not a sponsored video or anything. Hopefully you guys have a good day. We'll see you again soon.